In this episode of Futures Thinking podcast, we are talking with Sem Devillart, a cultural analyst and strategist focused on visual and online culture. We try to explain how the futurists work, how you turn cultural signals into high-value intelligence, media content, and business models. What kind of tools you use, how do you convince people it brings value and sense to them and their organizations. You are listening to the Futures Thinking podcast, where we are sharing live conversations with people of business, design, arts, culture, science and nature who are shaping our futures today. I'm your host, Agata Bisping. I always wonder, how do you explain people what futurists do? I mean, other than, forecasting or being like a wizard or being like a fairy. Where is the gist, the data, the proof in there?
So it's another term for trend forecasting. The future can be like tomorrow, it can be next second, it can be next week, or it can be 10 years ahead. So I think it also depends on what time frame you're talking about. I tend to work more around the scheme of 2 years, more or less. So not far future, like man is going to merge with machine. I don't go there. I don't go into like 50 years ahead or 20 years ahead.
It's not speculative future, but it's future just right behind the corner.
Yes. And I was asked the other day, like, clairvoyance, what makes you guys different to clairvoyance? And I said, look, clairvoyance, clair is clear and voyance is seeing. So it's about seeing clearly. It does not mean that you're looking out. It's about being in the moment, being in the present, and understanding the very circumstance and the nature of the phenomena around you in the present.
We've been talking about your profession, and you are also a cultural analyst. Can you say what is that you are doing exactly? What is your profession?
Yeah, I think when we say cultural analyst, it means that the material that I look into. So, for example, clairvoyance might look at your palm or tarot cards. So the material that I look at is culture, which means basically almost everything, but it means it's a special attention to the aesthetic world, to movies, from movies to music, to design, to any kind of cultural manifestation that is the result of a particular process, an emotional process, right? With an emotion and the thinking comes in.
Sounds like fun. It doesn't sound like a job at all.
Oh, I think I chose to do this because I love going to the theater and read the newspaper.
Okay, and what kind of future you find there? Because one may think that, watching movies, going to the theater, reading newspapers, analyzing all of this only gives us the knowledge about today or yesterday. How do you find any, sparks of tomorrow there?
I feel, and this is interesting, the deeper you dig into the analysis, the more obscure, the less you can see, the deeper you go, the more the likelihood that you will find something which you would call the driver. Like, what is making this happen? And when you understand the driver, then it's almost as if you understand the energy behind something, right? And when you understand that energy and you can put it into words, then you can translate it and you can interpret that energy. Use, for example, any kind of, not use, but you can transfer that energy into the creation of design or the creation of the movie or anything that you want to actualize, that you want to make future-proof, as I sometimes call it.
And how do you know that you have found it? How do you know that this is it?
So there are many ways that people like I work, many, many ways. And the way that I work is transdisciplinary. So what I do is I look at cultural phenomena like music, theater. I look at the news. I look what is trending, tweets, all sorts of phenomena that are output, that is cultural output. And when I see that there is a common denominator amongst these different phenomena, then I say, this is a formula. If it's something in music that I'm seeing in music that is also happening in fashion at the very same time, because that's important, it has to happen at the same time frame, then I know we have here a formula, like almost like a stylistic formula that will inform the way we want to design further the objects or services, products, anything. So I know that I'm on trend when I find this thing that connects these other elements.
Okay. Do you think that growing up between 7 languages and growing up on 3 continents has at all influenced the fact that you are a trend analyst, that you dive deep into the cultures and that you are able to spot the little sparks and put them together into the line?
It's very good. Yes, absolutely. For, I think, 2 main reasons. Unlike other children of diplomats, they would be they would be sent to American schools or, right? My mother, she always just threw me into new schools, new languages where I didn't understand anything. And I very quickly, the way I had to adapt and observe and see and understand the codes of what was going on in order to survive. Schools can be rough. So I think that definitely went well with my personality as well, of standing outside and figuring out how things work.
So you stood out and you were an observer?
Always, yes. So it's also my nature. So the circumstances collided with, I think, with my nature of observing and figuring out things. And it's beautiful because if you understand something, you can predict something. If you understand a pattern, then you can forecast, in other words. That's one thing. The other thing is another element that definitely has a lot to do with what I do, and that is rooted in my childhood, is that when I was 4, I went to live in East Africa, 1 hour away from Dar es Salaam, the country called Tanzania. And so not in the center, not in the town, not in the diplomatic circles, like really apart. We lived on a cliff on top of the ocean in a house that was wood and glass, very simple. And I was an only child and there were no neighbors. You know, I had to occupy myself, had to figure out what to do. No television, no radio for several years. No television, no radio, no telephone, no children. But I spent most of the time in the ocean or at the beach. And what I would do is collect shells. And I collected, that was like my obsession. And I had an incredible collection of shells. And then what did I do once I collected the shells? I would classify them. I would organize them. So first I will then, I'm going to put together all the pointy shells, and then I will gather them and make little groups. Now I'm going to organize all the pointy and red shells together, and then I would make these. So that is like a work of clustering, right? So you understand the phenomenon, you see something, you identify the components of these phenomenon, and then you can cluster and organize these phenomena. And that's really what I do with information. So when I mentioned to you that I look at transcategorical phenomena, I look at the red thread that unites different things that are happening at the same time and mix things that, or phenomena that one would normally not correlate. So, for example, it can be a news article and a new song that is trending, right? Like these things are very different.
How do you correlate that?
Okay, well, this is interesting. We can get like deep into method if you wish.
Yeah. We'll do that definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start like in a simple way. It's almost, I don't know if you heard of the phenomenon of synesthesia. So right, so it's a little bit like as if you were operating synesthetically, and in which form? I do have the belief that inside every thought or every phenomenon, there is some sort of form.
Okay.
And a song can have a form, a color can have a particular form, a baby name that is trending can have a particular form, as much as the sole of a shoe can have a particular form, and you can associate these forms.
But it takes a lot of experience, I believe, and also a lot of internal insight and internal experience to be able to think, like you've just said, to be able to connect these patterns, to be able to see them, and to be able to figure that they are like puzzles. They can be set together, and that they make the whole. That like this is the whole part, and you have chosen only a little bits of it. And this is what amazes me. That, can I ask you, how many languages do you speak?
Oh, well, I used to speak more and one forgets. At the moment 6, but I used to speak 7.
This is something incredible, because all the research about learning a language says that it simply broadens the mind, and also the patterns behind the language, they also leave the cultural code in your brain. So this is an enormous gift you have been given by your parents, that you've been able to live in all those continents and speak so many languages. Is it a gift for you?
Yes, I'm absolutely grateful. But there was also something that one could consider as a disadvantage. I had some dyslexic tendencies, but due to those tendencies, I just knew that I had to memorize. So if I looked at a word, I would not be able right away to spell it out, to read it out in a normal, but I would just like imagine these are signals and signs that I would have to memorize, as if you would paint a picture. So correlating things, you can't see patterns if you don't remember things. So there are two things, like the cross-categorical understanding, so seeing the connection between one thing and the other. But if you have a lot of data or a lot of information, you have to retain that information. So I feel that having a good memory, like memory capabilities, is definitely important.
You need to have good memory to memorize seven languages.
Well, I can give you, Agatha, a little bit of biographical example of how I got to see these correlations as well. So I studied in the south of Germany, comparative religion, sociology, and art history. And particularly in art history, something that struck me was that in particular eras, particular points of time, you would see correlations between different media. So if you think about 16th century and you listen to the music of 1620 and look at the architecture of 1620, look at the politics 1620 and the fashion, etc., you will see that there is a common pattern. So I was particularly interested, don't ask me why, in Spain, 16th century Spain. And then as I was very immersed in that era, I realized, and this is like in the 90s, we're talking now about the past, I realized, why don't I look at the moment, at the very moment, and see if these correlations exist? So I moved then from southern Germany to Berlin, and it was a very exciting time because the wall came down, and Berlin was like, wow, it was full of energy, and everything was changing rapidly. And as you might, don't know exactly your generation, but there was a techno scene going on, which was very interesting. So just to give an example, I would go to these clubs, but with my notebook, and observe, wow, ecstasy, look, you don't feel any boundaries. It's no coincidence you call it the love drug. So the wall came down, with ecstasy, you have the love drug. Then the World Wide Web was like, wow, people would start talking about surfing the internet. Then Zygmunt Bauman, Polish sociologist and philosopher, would talk about liquid modernity, and you will see these water metaphors, which is, it's not solid, it's about fluidity. And there were like a whole, let's say, elements in culture that responded to that pattern. So that is a form, that is a particular form. You can call it liquid, you can call it borderless, you can call it open, but it is a form. It's a form that you saw operating in neoliberalism and globalization, which was like very much embraced by many people then, less critically looked at than today. The internet, right? Like the openness, all that was very optimistic. There was it was a very optimistic era. And all these, I just gave you some examples, from music to the drug to the politics, it has a form. So and here, let's think about synesthesia. Does this feel more like a stone or does this feel more like water? It feels more like water. So that is what I mean when there is a form behind the thought.
I'm just sometimes when I get excited about something, I tend to disrupt. So sorry for that.
No, please disrupt.
I was just wondering. You are talking about observing, but you are observing now. You are talking about things that you have. As far as your example is concerned, you were talking about the things that were going on now and then, and this is something that you observed. How can you put that into the future? How can you say, okay, listen, in 2 years' time, you need to take into consideration this, and this in order for your organization or company or institution to succeed or to thrive or to avoid a crisis? How do you do that?
Okay. So if, for example, a client asks me, we don't know if we should go for A or for B. It's rare that a client will say, tell me the future. More and more, I find that it gets more, the future shorter. Like it's not so much 10 years ahead, but wow, we don't know which manuscript to choose. Should we choose this one or this one? Or we don't know which color palette to go. Should we go more for this one or for this one or for this one? It's not like, wow, it's not open-ended. And then with this kind of forms, I can say, well, this would be on trend. This would not be on trend. And I know that. So that is in regards to the short term. Okay. Yeah. Now talking about the next step. It's all hypothetical, but I look at association networks. So for example, let's just take something very simple like yoga. I know yoga has an association. You associate things with yoga, right? Now, again, it's not synesthesia, but it's more like thinking about associative. If yoga is trending, if you're seeing lots of people into yoga, and then you had to bet your, imagine, investor, whether you're going to go for coffee, you're going to invest shares in coffee or in tea, what would you do?
Tea, obviously.
Yes. And then if you go into yoga and you see, wow, this is growing very much. Originally, maybe people wanted to get a toned body. It was not the spiritual thing necessarily. But then they go and practice. They see, wow, this is really working. But oh my God, I feel so balanced. And and namaste and the whole kind of philosophy comes in. And then slowly, you might move into meditation. And it opens a new perspective. So that is something that I often work on. I look at the association networks, and then I know if something is trending. I always need to know what is trending right now. So it's not like what's trending in the future. What's trending right now, and what is the family? Who is the family? What's the family member around this?
That's a great metaphor. I was wondering how something gets trendy or, getting into your view. So you spot it and you say, okay, this is the signal of change. This is the signal that something is on the market. And how does it happen that, for example, those Nikes have been spotted as something hot? That you've started to notice that, people started to wear Nikes, that this was something that is to talk about or something not to be missed. How does it happen? Yeah, the marketing, of course, the influencers, of course, but are there any other, like the yoga stuff? Does it mean that, there was one yoga person that actually started doing yoga, like Gwen Paltrow with her Netflix series on mindfulness and yoga, and all of a sudden other people started? Is it possible that those trends are rooted in culture and in culture pieces, by which I mean like movies, theaters, newspapers and magazines, and people just picking up things saying, whoa, that's cool?
Yeah. So many of my colleagues, and also including myself, occasionally work by seeing new stuff that is popping up. And you find that very easily. So either you find it over, there are many services that provide you, this is new. So you can get like data behind that, right? Like you can see what is trending. But I do work slightly different. So what I do is I take a phenomenon that is trending and I slice it in its components. And I have a database where I write down all these particular components Of course, I can't do it with everything, but I do it with a pretty high amount of manifestations or signals, as we call it. And I don't see so much the thing itself trending. It's the quality in this thing that is trending. This pencil that is black might not be trending because it's a cool pencil. It might just be because it's black. And if I see, for example, imagine Beyonce, okay? She's giving out, she gave out a new video and it's called Lemonade, right? And everybody's listening to this music and they're dancing. Then I know, I'm making a very, very artistic example. And I look at this yellow notepad.
Okay, you know what will sell, yeah.
It will go, the quality of this color will go up. So the likelihood that this will go higher is higher than if the song was called in a completely different way. So it's not the thing itself so much as the quality. And the way I get to observe this is often by understanding, because of psychology, what are the people primed? What are the brains like? What has been the major input that they have been taking? Because that will prime the way you look at reality.
Wow, that takes a lot of knowledge. And I was wondering whether organization, companies, and institutions at all see the value in culture and in analyzing culture in such way.
Often they don't even know how I analyze.
But do they come up with you as clients and say, well, since you've been analyzing the culture, can you do something for us and help us, see what we are doing wrong, or maybe what we can do better with your tools, with your knowledge? Or they turn into marketing department or to the business strategist and try to sort their struggles there?
So recently, most of the requests have been around method. Many companies, they have so much data, they have the most amazing reports. Yeah. But then these beautiful reports often are like standing on a shelf and they rot on the desktops. They don't really get used. So what has been lately happening a lot is companies coming in and asking, can you help us develop a pipeline, like a process on how we can work with this material? And sometimes, most of the times, what I recommend is to create a database with all the signals and slice the signals. Slice the signals, put them into the components, see what components are important to you. And then you can see what the qualities are that are trending instead of the thing itself. We often perceive the world as the thing. Like, this song is trending, these shoes are trending, that handbag is trending, this tweet is trending, but it does not say anything. You need to understand what are the components and what are the driving forces behind this object that is trending. It's not the thing itself. But what we often see, particularly older trend reports, is a catalog of new stuff. So, for example, the future of health, and then you see all these new initiatives or startups that are working the health space. And that is useful, but it doesn't really predict. It does not help you necessarily to understand what is the driving force.
Okay, so let's just follow that path. If you are saying that you need to look deeper and find the quality or the value behind it, and if we are into the healthcare, then you would need to find what satisfies people need of feeling better, feeling more fit, or feeling more secure as far as their health is concerned, and then try to find what are the signals in the market, like yoga stuff, to say, for example, okay, I will now turn my fitness gym into the mindfulness practice that will help people practice yoga, because this is the trend that I'm seeing. They need to stay fit, they need to stay healthy, they need to have the components of their body and mind together. So this is my value proposition for their needs.
Yeah, that could be a way of also working. But it could also be, you are assuming that people want to be healthy when they say they want to be healthy. What if somebody said, actually, for example, now that we are like jazzing with ideas, said healthy is actually what I really feel like doing. Like I really feel happy if I eat this big bag of crisps. It makes me happy, and that's what's healthy for me. Feeling happy in that way by doing what I want. Not just like what we are seeing, but just understanding what is the concept of health. So it's more, I think, going deeper into psychological motifs.
Okay. And how do you work with that? How do you you have all the data, you have sliced it, you have made all the cataloging stuff. And how do you do the pipeline?
Very, very good question. And actually for me, it's kind of a new adventure. The data and all the tools that are out there are just like so incredible that we are being pushed as well as trend forecasters. It used to be that Google Images didn't even exist. So it was like, wow, just getting images together that suggest the topic was just like, whoa, how wonderful. And people would pay very well for that. But now that work that took a month, it's just done in an hour nowadays. Okay, so a lot is happening and making us change also our approaches. So one, let's say, change that I've been lately looking at is, okay, again, let's get ready, like a sip of water, like for a little bit of a trip. When we look at trends, we often say, this thing is trending. Like the color red is trending, right? That's how we talk about it. Or this kind of sport is trending, or these type of shoes are trending, or that could be the case, but that can change very quickly because things are more fickle. So I find it much more interesting not to look at what is really just trending, like what horse is winning. That's interesting. But it's only really interesting if you know all the other horses that are on the race. So normally we look at the horse number 1, that is drup, drup, drup at the beginning. Now think about, I'm interested in knowing what's horse number 1, horse number 2, horse number 3, horse number 4, horse number 5. Or if we talked about colors, I don't want to just know if red is trending. I want to see what is trending next, what's behind. And sometimes the last horse has a faster acceleration rate. Right?
Yeah.
And that's exciting to see, wow, the little underdog is like drop, 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 like catching up. So it's a dynamic process, and more we are able to observe this, let's say, horse race. So therefore, lately, what I've been doing is I start with a nomenclature. I don't know how you say this. So look at all possible. So for example, nomenclature of colors is just having all colors lined up. So I'm not just looking at red, but blue, yellow, like all participants, all the actors, collect them all. Have a look at everything, and then ideally measure it. How
do you measure it?
This is very tricky. Again, this is something that we are at the cusp at the beginning. We are starting to doing this, to understanding how to measure these different entities. I occasionally help out a non-for-profit called Harmony Labs, which does something called narrative research. It looks to understand the narratives around a particular space, a particular topic. And in order to doing that, the first step is identifying the different narratives around one particular topic. So it's not just like the trending, winning narrative, but other narratives, all the possible narratives you could imagine. And then the next step, once describes them, is how to measure them.
This is so hard, I believe, nowadays especially, that you try to find other narrative that is still due to the main topic, but it's other than the one that it's fixed. If you look for other narratives, you need to allow yourself to think differently and allow yourself also to get what it brings. And for you as a researcher, this is a great opportunity, I believe, and you are thrilled to see the whole spectra of it. But for a person that is used to seeing the world in one dimension, finding another narrative about the topic that she is fixed at and sees only one side of it, this is really difficult. And I've been running through the Harmony Labs websites, obviously preparing myself for this conversation and seeing what you've been doing, that you are trying to change the narrative of media in order to make the world a better place. I'm just, putting this a little bit this is so difficult to change the media narrative.
Yes, well, a lot of like speculative design, or they are often based on making the prognostic, like creating the solution. I'm more interested in the diagnosis of the problem, like what is happening right now. It's not so much the application. That is something that other people are amazing at. I'd rather just stick to what is the status quo. So it's not about changing. For me, it's not so much about changing the narrative. That's often the clients want that. So therefore that's how, it's more about, first, you want to understand the status quo. It's like if you went to a doctor, you don't want to have like a scenario planning doctor necessarily, or a speculative design doctor. You want a doctor that really looks at you and makes the right diagnosis. In other words, you want somebody who understands the present moment more than anything. And then comes in the next stage. Okay, how are we going to fix this? Imagine this, imagine that. This is a possible future one. This is a possible future two. That's not my thing. My thing is just look, understand how are things correlated? What are the associative networks? What is a particular form? What is the energy? What is the driver? How does this all work? That is what I'm interested in. And luckily, I mean, this initiative, the Harmony Labs initiatives and understanding narratives, has given me some space to work on these topics.
This is great, because only if you know where are you at, what are your perspectives, then you will know what your perspectives are.
Yes. And back to your question, how does knowing different worlds and languages help, is really that your data set, like let's say you have more operating systems running parallel. It's a little bit like that. If you have a computer, you want it to have as many operating systems that as much as it
running
right?
simultaneously,
to think in one way and then to judge or to close ourselves or not even perceive something different. So that is actually for me almost like a spiritual exercise to doing this work, because I have to get familiar with stuff that I don't even necessarily at first sight like necessarily, right?
How do you handle this? How do you handle the fact that you've, found the fact that you are not comfortable with or you don't like it?
It's like a sport in a way. I had in the past several assignments that were certainly difficult. For example, understanding very radical groups of particular political directions and digging deep into very dark channels, social media and forums, and taking in information that is not necessarily healthy, right?
Okay.
Because it can affect you. So the only way by doing this is by taking distance, by looking at it very, very detached, very objectively. You don't want to operate a family member because you are too attached to this family member, right?
Yeah.
So obviously. It's like finding, but also I feel this shouldn't by no means sound too sentimental, but a lot of compassion. You have to work with empathy and compassion in order to understand the different points of view. So
how do you handle it afterwards? What do you do with this knowledge? I mean, the facts are helping you to build the reports or whatever the outcome you need to deliver. But what do you do with what stays in you? How do you handle that?
Without sounding too esoteric, sometimes you have to understand that the thoughts that go through your head, that's not you. And that made me understand also, that we human beings, society in itself, we believe that we know that we have an identity, etc. But we're so malleable. Sometimes I see myself as a vessel, right, through which ideas flow and thoughts flow, and they keep changing constantly, and everything keeps changing. And therefore, I find it more and more interesting to see what are people digesting, what type of input are they taking. Of course, everybody takes different input, but there are some sort of highway inputs, like inputs that more people take and inputs that less people take. Yeah. So getting to understand that, because that primes the way you perceive the world. I like to make this example. This is when I speak to my students. If you go, for example, to an exhibit and, for example, Van Gogh. And you spend 2 hours looking at paintings, Van Gogh paintings, and you really get into it. And then you step out, you go into the world. What is the likelihood that you would see surfaces as the sum of different particles, little particles or brush strokes? It's pretty high because you've been taking it that way. And if you went to an exhibition of cubism and you were into it, and you spent there 2 hours and you walk out, you go out of leave the museum, you will see lots of squares and lots of angles.
There is so much hope in it. I mean, this would be great if all people would, just immerse themselves into culture and get to not even know it better, but just allow themselves to experience it, to see what it makes with their bodies, with their minds, how they would react to culture. That also changes the perspective and allows people to communicate better, to understand, to empathize, to understand the other's perspective. And this brings me to the question, how you care about your empathy and knowledge of the world, of your data. How do you, update your knowledge of what's going on in the world? I can imagine that working with so many stuff that you need to analyze, this is sometimes hard for you just to step from the work side to the side that you feel, okay, this is just for me. This is what I need to do in order to, update the system.
It's really, for me, it's not so much a work. It's just a state of being. That's one thing. The other thing is, it depends always on the assignment I'm in, right? Like analyzing hardcore white supremacism, or analyzing meat boxes, like how is meat being stored? Like it's all different. The brain goes in different directions. But something that is to be said, sometimes it's not as so much about the quantity of the data that you take in as much as how long you spend with one phenomenon, and you go so deep. It sounds a little bit, I meditate, that helps too, by the way.
Yeah, that helps, I believe, to ease your mind, which operates on, several levels simultaneously. So that really is soothing. I have 5 last questions, and actually this is like the big 5 situation in which I will start, and there are like filling the blank sentences. So I will start and I will ask you to fill in the blank.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So social innovation is about
what people consider to make the world a better place.
Okay. We started with that question, actually. A futurist is a person who
is in the now.
Can you explain?
Mm-hmm. In order to see what happens next, you need to see very closely what's happening now. And if you look very, very closely, you can see the emergence, like the slow emergence of the new.
I'm so overwhelmed with your clarifications. You are so precise, like a scalpel. Your thoughts are just, and you can't add anything. I want my clients to.
I would like my clients to understand methods more, the type of methods we use, and I would love my clients to also being more in the present and seeing clearly.
And the word speculative is about?
The word speculative is about the what if.
Okay, and what do you do with it? What do you do with the what if question?
Mm-hmm. I find the types of works that I've been seeing very interesting because they are like crutches for the imagination. Like they help the imagination, and they have a real domain in taking ideas and making them palpable, almost like solid.
I guess it's really hard for people to think in an abstract way and to find a value in thinking in such way, because it's considered as, as something less serious than thinking that is based on data and on information that is put into statistics and that is being collected. Being speculative, thinking in an abstract way, it's just like, well, okay, they just have a lot of fun. What can you get out of it? Where is the gist? Where is the sense? Where's the money in it?
Yeah. Well, I feel many designers certainly don't want to be designing stuff. So I here to get to speak to many young designers say, I don't want to do stuff. I don't want to create more chairs. Like, there are enough chairs in the world. And therefore venture more into the world of the imaginary and the analysis and research, etc. And I have the feeling that the side effect of this endeavor of understanding data, for example, information, is that we this might sound a little bit science fiction, get to come closer to understanding what really information is. What is the nature of information? Just like the atom is is a unit of matter. What is information? Like, is there such thing as, what is analogous? How is it being structured? The way we often talk about information or see information, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is that we think more about pipelines and channels. And it's yes, we talk about networks and right? But what is it? What is the stuff that flows through these channels? Why does it live? Why does it die? Why does it, why do we forget? Why does an idea associate to the other idea? What is it? Like, that is exciting to me. And I feel that all this movement towards, if you want to say data, is making us seeing the nature of thought, information, data as something more haptic.
This is abstract. Yeah.
It is, yes, but I feel that is, if you think about the tools, right? We needed to have a telescope in order to verify particular laws of the universe, right?
Yeah, or a microscope to see the atom. Yeah.
So now we have all these amazing tools that follow data or enlarge our view on what data is and how it moves and how it behaves.
And what can we do with this information? Because knowing how it works, how it operates, to see the structure, the pattern is one thing, and how to use it and how to use it wisely, those are two different questions. And what does it mean wisely at all? I mean, not to be harmful for anyone using the data that you have gathered and structured. So how do you channel people or your clients so they know how to use the data that you've gathered, structured and brought so they can use it?
Again, what they do with the data, of course, you always want good clients and you want to work with good clients, but what they do with it is not really my concern at all. My concern is just give us an accurate image of what's happening in this very moment around a particular topic or a particular product, service, or whatever the reality is at this very moment. I do believe, unlike many, I do believe that there is such thing as reality.
Yeah, okay.
I do.
Okay. And 2020 has allowed me to?
Has allowed me to read nonfiction. No, to read fiction again.
And what is the latest fiction you've read?
It's actually not the latest. It's just old classics like Kafka, like short stories, Stefan Zweig, because I often have to keep up, right, with all the news, all and when I was younger, I used to devour the old classics, right? And thought like, well, as I got more into working and on assignments, I could not have the luxury of reading fiction. But now I do.
Wow, great. The latest fiction that I'm struggling with is The Troubled Blood. I don't know if you know that.
No. Yeah, that's a big book.
Yeah, and it's in English, so it's like quite a challenge for me, and it's like almost 1,000 pages, and it's Robert Galbraith, which actually is J.K. Rowling.
Oh,
She writes, and it's a crime series, of course, about a detective that discovers all the stuff. So it's easy reading, but it's a fiction, so it's nice stuff. The very last question that I have for you today is: what is the weirdest thing that you've bought during pandemic?
Okay, weird is not necessarily weird for other people, but it was very weird for me.
Yeah, okay.
I never thought that I would buy jogging trousers, jogging.
Yeah.
I thought, no.
That's not going to happen to me.
Because I'm not so much into sports.
Okay.
So, but because of the pandemic and hanging out in the house, etc., I started thinking,
have you been using it for jogging or just for sitting comfortably in a chair?
For sitting, for meditating, and for working on my
Yeah. You must have noticed that the fashion also changed. That people tend to dress up from the bottom up.
Yes.
And what stays by the table stays behind the table.
Yes.
That's funny. Well, thank you.
It was nice talking to you, Agata.
Yes, it was nice talking to you too. I hope you enjoyed it and that you had a good time.
Thank you. The questions were deep.
Yeah, I tried to follow the line, but it is so interesting to talk to you. You are listening to the Futures Thinking podcast, where futures meet present, powered by Green Hat Innovation and 360inspiration.nl.